so my name is Max, and this is from Mutual Aid to Civic Campaigns. And do you want the other mic?
Hi, I am Serena. I use pronouns she, her, and I'm grateful for ice cream. And we're here tonight to tell you about the last 2 years of our lives and how we got here.
Will it work?
Oh.
Okay. My name is Max. This is my second time coming to Civic Tech. I think the first time was in 2015. So it's great to be back. I'm grateful that Civic Tech is still growing strong. And I use he, him pronouns. So I'm a double immigrant. I was born in Odessa, Ukraine, and then I grew up in the States. That's a picture of the IAD data center in beautiful suburban Washington, D.C., where I spent my youth. And then I came to Toronto for university, and I never really left. So as Ilya so kindly said in my intro, I started my career as a professional hacker, looking like a less attractive version of that guy. I started consulting in a consultancy, then I switched to consulting on my own. Kind of got burnt out about that. And then I went to a place called the Reeker Center, which is like a programming retreat, which was really meaningful for me. And it's where I met Serena through the alumni network. And after that, I came back and started building a security startup, worked really hard on that, did that startup life. My company got acquired by a popular version control company, and I worked there for 2 years until I got, again, very burnt out. It's the start of the pandemic, and I left my job to go back to the Reeker Center to work on my own projects. And at the same time, I got involved with the Bike Brigade, which is a mutual aid organization here in Toronto. And what the Bike Brigade does is like deliveries on bicycles for food banks, for mutual aid groups. And I spent a lot of my time just like writing software to run the back end of this and run a dispatch system. And I was like, wow, this is like the most meaningful thing I can do with my skills. Like I'm writing the software that real people are using. It's not for like programmers. It felt really good, and it was very important.
Hi, I'm Serena. I live in Toronto, but like many people in the city, I wasn't born here. I grew up in Tuscany. And over the last 15 years, I have been an expat, a digital nomad, and an immigrant. And what I've learned through the last 20 years or so living away from home on my own and like various oceans away from them is that finding your people is extremely important. Like the people that you surround yourself with, your community, are your family. I studied statistics, and in my first job in Melbourne as a consultant, I learned that I learned pretty much everything that I know about being a good data scientist. And I also learned that the skills that I have can be used for good. The people that I worked with were very picky about the projects that they chose, and they were very, very adamant to pick only things that were net neutral at worst. So finished that experience. On my way back to Europe, I had a stopover in New York where I did this programming retreat, the Reeker Center, where I met Max. And that was another really formative experience in terms of community building. The Reeker Center has a very strong community of people that are very curious and kind. And it was just really formative to see that in opposition to the kind of networking that I had seen before, which was like very like business driven and like, are we getting work done? So I moved back to Europe, and I go through the startup cycle, burnouts, taking some time off, going back into startups, taking some time off from a burnout. And in order to balance I tried to stay net neutral, but in order to balance what I was doing in my day job, I also volunteered in this. I kind of discovered the Tech for Good space, and I got really involved with DataKind UK. I remember the first time that that I participated in a data dive, which is the hackathon of DataKind. We worked with this charity for like a few weeks ahead of the event, and then it was really powerful to see how their eyes lightened up in terms of when we showed things that were like simple for us and like maybe like not, it wasn't groundbreaking machine learning or anything like that. It was just like histograms or, simple numbers that really changed how they ran their operations and made a huge difference, which is like brought me a lot of joy. So I moved to Toronto and I go through another cycle of burnout and taking time off. I go back to the Recruit Center. In 2020, as Max is living his job, I take a job in a famous Canadian e-commerce and spend the next 2.5 years steadily burning out. Uh, the other thing that happens in 2020 is my good friend Max pulled me in Bike Brigade, and together we sort of like explored this concept of mutual aid.
Okay, so mutual aid, I love that there was a definition of civic tech. So this is a definition of mutual aid, and it comes from Dean Spade. So mutual aid is the collective coordination to meet each other's needs, usually from an awareness that the systems we have in place are not going to meet them. And so there's this inherent like resistance in mutual aid.
But if we take out the resistance and the political aspect, what mutual aid is at the core is community care, is taking care of each other. So fast forward to 2022, it feels like the pandemic should be at the end. We're really hoping it will be soon. And we're kind of talking about this. We're seeing a lot of our friends going through these cycles of burnouts and taking time off and then going back into this other cushy tech jobs and then going back into burnouts and sort of like repeating that over and over. And we're starting to wonder if we can't have a space, or if we could create a space where our tech friends and our social impact friends can mingle in sort of like a serendipitous kind of way, and maybe more things like Bike Brigade would happen.
So we started our first project, which is One Energy Space, and One Energy Space is that. So it's a co-working and community space. We operate out of the Junction. And we have, some people use it as a co-working space for their day-to-day. We host our own events. We let our members run their events. We have like a little garden. We have kind of like monthly dinners. We're doing a lot of stuff there to like build that community. And then there's more.
6 to 8 months into having the space, it feels like, we're like meeting new people. It feels like the dinners are going really well, and it's like community is happening. There's good connections and good energy. And we started wondering if instead of doing the things that we do for Bike Brigade as volunteers, we couldn't make it our day job. And that's kind of how like One Energy Labs was conceived as a way for us to take our big tech skills and apply them to projects that we care about and that serve our communities. So the following is kind of like a summary of what made us feel like it is possible, and kind of like going through some pivotal moments in like our story as like a consultancy.
So our first milestone was in February of last year, and it was our first client, and we were like, okay, like we can actually start doing this. So we started working with Not Far From the Tree, which is Toronto's fruit tree harvesting or gleaning program. And if you're not familiar, the way Not Far From the Tree works is folks have fruit trees in their backyards, and Not Far From the Tree provides people to come pick that fruit. And then the pickers keep some of the fruit, the tree owners keep some of the fruit, and some of the fruit is donated to food banks and the like. And they were running on this like custom volunteer portal that was written some number of years ago by a consultancy that unfortunately doesn't operate anymore, which is a bit of a problem. And we came to kind of do two things. One is just like, we're going to keep this portal alive. Like we have the skills to run the software and you can at least like keep doing your season. And we're going to help you make those like big strategic decisions, both like in terms of what software to use next. Do we stick with this? Do we change? And like these like high level, like questions about data and strategy that we can answer just by like going into the database and running queries for them that the software maybe can't do.
Through this time, we're still kind of volunteering on Bike Brigade, but in October 2023, they got a big grant, and we kind of like they become one of our clients. This is kind of like a big milestone for us because first it's an origin story, and also kind of like really makes it feel as if we manifested this like job that we were like doing as volunteers. So for the first time, we're like get a good chunk of money to do actual big tech work where we're like build a whole new feature. The Bike Brigade had this like dispatch software that was used by internal volunteers. If you sign up for Bike Brigade right now, which you should, um, you can sign up on the volunteer portal that we just recently launched. And there's even a little bit of leftover money to build a full analytics dashboard, which is fancy.
And the last kind of milestone we want to talk about happened very soon after that in November, where we had like our first big project. And it, it was a for-profit company, but it's a company in the States that does, they do civic engagement campaigns for progressive causes. And they had a big need to build an internal tool to track like pieces of paper with signatures on them and know where each piece of paper was. And it allowed us to grow our team, which was great. And we got to go, Serena and I got to go to Vegas to help them launch the campaign they were working with, which was they're attempting to get an amendment in the Nevada Constitution guaranteeing the right to abortion, which felt really meaningful and good. And we got to like pay ourselves doing work that was aligned with us. So that felt like we can actually keep going on this path and this is going to work out.
So we've been at this for about 2 years between the space and labs, and we are not at a point where like, we're like still there's a lot to do. We run the space not almost as a like no profit where we want it to be sustainable and kind of like pay for itself, but it isn't quite there yet, and so labs still pays for it a little bit, and also we're like figuring out how to manage just two things and like growing a team and all of that. But we have learned some lessons.
All right. So I have started businesses before, and starting when business is very hard. It turns out that if you're doing two at the same time, it's actually more than twice as hard. It does grow exponentially, or the other thing that isn't just doubling.
So what are the lessons of like a connected lesson is we have to prioritize ruthlessly. That means there's only two of us. We have a great community that supports us, but at the end, we are the responsible for keeping things going. And it doesn't matter how many things are completed. There's a never-ending list of tasks to do that keep being open and like kind of grow never-endingly. So what I mean by prioritize is we started doing community dinners every Tuesday, which meant that the two of us were kind of like cooking and hosting and kind of like preparing for every Tuesday, which is one less day of billable hours. And that became unsustainable. So we had to decide to like do the dinners once a month, keep that tradition going, but not doing them every week to preserve energy and be more sustainable, stuff like that.
Okay, so the second lesson is when something is everyone's responsibility, it's no one's responsibility. So we're both like pretty nerdy people and like want to do the interesting deep dives and maybe not the social media and the marketing. Like maybe like a year and a half in, we started, as we brought on collaborators, we started writing memorandums of understanding with our collaborators to outline the responsibilities of our projects. And then we looked at each other, we're like, we should do this between ourselves. And now we have like a much clearer outline of who takes what responsibility, and we can check in and actually like assign the tasks that neither of us want to do amongst each other.
We do have social media now and a website. The next lesson is don't do it on your own. I mentioned that we have a strong community that supports us. This means two things from the lab's perspective. Both Bike Brigade and Not Far From the Tree are open source, which means that we're going to take care of the most urgent, high priority tasks, but there's room for others to contribute and to help push the projects a little bit forward, which we wouldn't necessarily be able to do completely on our own as a team of two. The other side is the space where we have found awesome collaborators who are excited about running events and help us having a live calendar with like regular events. We have a side project social that runs every Thursday or every other Thursday. We have this like community days that we run regularly. We have an art jam that runs monthly. And we've been doing more like kind of like weekend events that are kind of like exciting and aren't just like the Max and Serena show, but rather like a group project, which is really exciting.
Okay, so always be, I can do it. I can pronounce it. Always be communicating. Communicating? Communicating. I think I can say it. Okay. So when I was going through YC, there was this like mantra where it's like, you got to pick a metric and you need to like increase it by 10% every week, which is brutal and hard and very capitalist. And our perspective is to do like the social capital version of this. So what we're trying to focus on increasing is the strength of the bonds in our community, which is a lot harder, but also feels a lot more meaningful.
If you're thinking that this is cool and you're excited about what we're doing and you're wondering how to get involved, we have a space in Junction. You should come and check it out and hang out with us, or talk to us about what you're up to, and maybe we'll find something to work on together.
Yeah. Cool. Let's get another round of applause for Max and Serena. All right, sweet. So we're moving on to questions. If you have a question in the room, raise a hand and a mic will come around. If you have a question online, drop a Q or again, your favorite letter into the chat and Ben will let us know about you. So as we wait for people to filter in online, we'll start in the room. Hands. 1, 2, 3.
First, just want to say thanks. Very inspiring presentation, really resonates with me. And this might be a bit of a loaded question, but I'm wondering how you balance working for mission-driven organizations and tech for good while you're, under pressure as, building a consultancy, trying to scale and grow. And you mentioned like capitalism and being for profit. Like, how do you balance between the altruistic tech for good while also, needing to survive and thrive?
I do. I think it's the same that you have, hopefully. It is, yeah. I mean, I think there's lines that we're not willing to cross, and that's good to know what those lines are. For like, potential clients that don't cross the line, a helpful thing to think about is what is the differential this client would need to pay for me to be doing this work. And there's like a couple of things to consider. One is like if there's a value, is the value gap, and that's like maybe not super aligned, but it's like kind of aligned, then there's a differential that you can charge and that makes it worth it. And if there is, I had something else to say, but I forgot what it was. I think the center of it is like there are lines that we don't cross. For those that don't cross the line, we can charge a little bit more depending on, as well as charging less for things that we really want to see happening in the world and we're happy to do for less.
And yeah, we maybe this is what you're thinking of. We sat down and we wrote like a list of principles, like what are our core values and the things that we want to support, and then we want to orient the stuff that we do based on what those principles were as we wrote them.
I think the other thing that we think about is timing. Like if I spend time on this thing that pays a bit more, but I can't do this other thing that doesn't pay as much, will I feel sad about it? And, the sadness factor is important.
Sweet.
You mentioned you did the community dinners once a month. Now they're once a week. Now they're once a month. Could you talk about the structure of those dinners?
They're not very structured. We spend a couple hours cooking. There's about 20 people coming usually. It's a family style. So like you come in, people kind of mingle for a little bit, and then hopefully someone will like lead the charge and like grab a plate and sit down. It's very, very serendipitous. Like there's no task, just kind of like come make a friend.
I think we should make it clear that they are open and public. And if you go to our website, you could see our events calendar. You can sign up for our mailing list and get invitations to those. So there is a monthly dinner that we run. It is unfortunately, even though it's only once a month, it is on a Tuesday. And we're not going to change that. Sorry.
But maybe we can do a joint civic dinner. I'm just gonna put it out there for the crowd.
Hands up for questions.
You both mentioned having experiences of burnouts. Like, how do you manage that, or do you have any like warning signs that you know not like you know how to recognize right now?
Okay. I think for me, burnout has always been caused by a feeling that I'm not in control of what I'm doing. Like it isn't about how hard I've been working. It's that I'm just like doing something that doesn't feel like it matters, or I feel like I'm struggling against something that I have no control or power over. In terms of how to manage it, I mean, I would like to give better advice than quit your job and take time off to recover, but I don't know of a better one. And in terms of warning signs, I think the big one for me personally is ahedonia, like this just like feeling of like nothing, like things that normally give me pleasure don't, and I'm just like can't find joy in everyday things. And that's when I'm like, okay, something is wrong. I should change something. Do you want to add to that?
No, I think this is pretty accurate. When I start hating my life and just kind of being grumpy all the time and not sleeping well, that's when I know that I'm burning out, when I feel like overwhelmed all the time. Yeah. I don't have better advice than quit your job. Say no more.
Hi, I have two questions. One is, how do you find clients, or how do they find you? And the second question is, how do you balance doing work for clients versus tackling problems that you see in your communities and you just want to solve firsthand without necessarily having a client that's like paying you or scoping the work for you?
Okay, well, to the first one, I think that at the scale that we are, we can have a pipeline on word of mouth and on networking, and it's helpful that there's like a location that interesting people that might have work come to. Like there is a way that the space and the consultancy kind of feed into each other. So talking to people, I think also coming into organizations without like, we talk to a lot of like civic organizations and nonprofits in a way that we don't necessarily think that we have a way to help them or have something to sell them, but we do know a lot of people, and somebody that in our network might be able to help them. And having that like baseline attitude is really helpful. The second question, I've actually forgot what it was.
I think
Do you
I don't have a good answer, but I remember the question. Unfortunately, I think the question was about balancing having client work and like kind of like solving problems that we see in the community without having necessarily a client. We have lots of ideas. I think we talk about stuff that we would like to do all the time. Unfortunately, the time is limited, so it's a ruthless prioritization. There's like some amount that we can do and that we do, but not always possible, unfortunately. You want to?
You both described how you have experiences like living and working in other places, and I assume you have like networks that reach, outside of Toronto as well. But I'm curious about like any observations you have about our context or opportunities for building connections between folks with technology skills and people who are doing work, or organizations that are doing work in the social sector. And if there are I'm really inspired by the work that you're doing and by the space that you've created to try to create more of those kind of connections. I guess I wonder if there's other kinds of infrastructures that you've seen in other places that you admire, that would be cool to have in Toronto, that could help us bridge what I see as a gap between those two sectors.
I think the example, I don't know if it's different than Toronto, to be honest, but I had a really good experience with DataKind in the UK, and I thought it was like, in the UK specifically, it was like completely volunteer run. There were like a bunch of committees, and there were like 1 or 2 people hired. And everyone was like very, very committed and very involved in closing that gap. I don't know if I've seen something that's different necessarily, but I do think that DataKind specifically has like a network of people that are kind of like, and so they share resources in some ways, and like, I think they share kind of like a knowledge base, which is like super helpful. I think that like the local context is always very important. And so like, it's hard, like I think thinking globally is beautiful, but I think at the end it is very local.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is the other part of the answer is what you expect to hear from a Canadian, which is there's just not as much money here as there is in the United States. And I think that that is both good and bad, like in the sense that, you know, our political system is not as awash with money as in the US is, which in some sense means that it is healthier. On the other sense, nothing here isn't as awash with money as it is in the United States, which means that it's hard to get like funding to do things that you think are important.
What's the formal organization, and have you ever thought about being a co-op?
Oh my God, yes. Yes. So we are a Canadian corporation that is like the thing that you click on a button online to create. We've been talking about, we have actually been talking about 2 different co-ops. So we have 2 different things here. We have a consultancy and we have a space. For the consultancy, we're very inspired by worker-owned co-ops. We think, like, we both think it's a great model. You do need 3 incorporators to incorporate a worker-owned co-op, and so far there is just the 2 of us, which is kind of the biggest blocker. Do you want to talk about models for the space?
Yeah. Well, first of all, right now we're operating everything from the same corporation, which is very, very bad. Every lawyer we speak to says. So we definitely need to split them. We've gone back and forth about how to organize the space in terms of like corporate structure. It's tricky because there's a lease that we're responsible for, the 2 of us. So it's like, it's hard to make it a co-op at this point. But the co-op model feels very right in terms of like shared ownership. This is not the Max and Serena show. We don't want it to be the Max and Serena show. And so how do we make, how do we like really communicate to the world that it isn't, and that like people that do bring their own kind of input aren't just like, bringing input and not getting anything out, like don't have ownership for real. We just formed an advisory board to help us figure out how to go about it, basically. And yeah, I think we're toying around with the idea of like a no-profit or a co-op or both. I think we're inspired by Hack Lab that operates as a co-op. I'm not part of a Hack Lab, so I could be wrong, but the way I hear about it and the way I heard other people talking about how it functions, it like sounds like it functions largely like a co-op, but it is a no-profit, incorporated as a no-profit. So I think that would open up some avenues for us as well.
We should have time for 1 or 2 more questions. And we got anything burning inside of them? I'll flow to curiosity. What would you say was like the biggest switch or like the biggest step to overcome to going from this is an idea to this is a reality? Like at what point did it become real in your mind, even if it wasn't real in real life?
I think for me, it was quitting my full-time job. Because when we started the space, I had a full-time job that was very cushy, and very, various degree of burnout and stuff. But yeah, it was, I think that was like really kind of like a commitment and like leaving this kind of the tech bubble for something else?
I don't actually have a good answer. I think it always just like, I don't know. I could just kind of make myself believe things sometimes. So that's a useful skill. I recommend cultivating it. Yeah. Yeah.
So like a lot of what you shared really resonates with me as someone who's like tried to spin up a studio and didn't really make it work because the business part of things is so hard. So maybe like my question for you is like what skills especially through this like memorandum of understanding, which is like very interesting. Do you both feel like you're like, you know what, actually, this is not my skill, like for either of you, and we want to like give it to someone else in terms of like the business or work or anything? Sorry, it's very like.
Not yet. I can think about it while you.
I mean, we did just hire a marketing consultant to hold my hand through figuring out how to market the space. So but that costs money. Before that, I think I just like tried to talk to people about it. And like, I think finding, people that are like aligned with what your vision is and wanna like, there's a lot, I think like, you know, people are nice. Most people are nice and wanna help you. So I find that, I'm like very stubborn, so like I just kind of like charge. But I think finding people that can tell me where I can learn and how to learn is like has been important. But you do have to wear lots of different hats, and I think something that's been my own personal struggle, for example, has been going from like a technical role to like an everything role. You know, what do I do now? It's like I don't know, a bunch of things. I don't know if that answers. No.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a good answer.
All right, sweet. Thank you guys very much.